Okay, so welcome you guys. We got the latest episode right here with, I will introduce you, documentary filmmaker, storyteller,
Okay.
artist, photographer now.
Wow, a lot of
After this weekend.
I feel like this is my version of he, him, she, her. Like you're just giving me all my pronouns right now.
I don't want to step all over you. What would you call yourself? What's your what's like the official title?
Isn't that funny?
Working title.
This has been the argument for years now. I used to call myself a storyteller because I started out in journalism, not to jump ahead too much. But I always called myself a storyteller, and now I feel like it's not cool anymore to call yourself a storyteller because everyone's a storyteller. And so now I'm just like, I make videos.
I like that, man.
Yeah.
Well, Ty's here today because he is launching his documentary, the Tucson Electro Doc, A Moment in Time in Tucson Underground. And I want to ask, how are you feeling right now, man?
I feel like the initial honeymoon phase is over. And as you know full well, I'm now in distribution phase, which is not fun at all.
I'm going to assume that a lot of these viewers maybe don't know the documentary. Mm-hmm. They don't know you yet. Can you let them know a little bit about the documentary?
Yeah, so I fell into this story where, long story short, I'd come back from traveling. I'm back in Tucson. I was in Europe, so I was kind of in that techno house underground scene when I was over there, experiencing a lot of that kind of music, which is very big for them. It's their pop music, basically, right? And I came back to Tucson, and I was like, all right, where is this music here? And the only thing I could find on the internet was Deep House Yoga, which was operating on the roof of Playground at the time, which was literally just like house music and people doing yoga. And I was like, not here for that. So it took me actually like about a month to figure out that there was this Dazed and Confused thing happening, this scene. And I just reached out for an interview because I was working at a place at the time that they were allowing me to do videos. And I was like, I'll interview these people that are doing this, show a little bit of the footage of the shows, and then make a little, profile piece, which I've been kind of doing for years, little profile pieces. And I met Elio and Ashley. What's her name? Ashley Green, Elio Sodascritti, at Playground before their Wednesday night, weekly thing they did. And I went to their first thing, and then I just got hooked. And so it became, I'm not going to just, make a little profile out of one of their shows. I was like, I just want to see where this story goes. And then basically 2 years later, I decided to stop. And I saw a lot of interesting things that made me reflect on how you have to operate in Tucson as an artist, as like a mover and shaker, whatever you want to call them. And then the music scene in itself that, you had these people trying to push this music here that doesn't really resonate with a lot of our culture here, outside of New York, LA, that kind of stuff. So all of those things came together, and I was like, all right, yeah, there's definitely a story to be told here. So that's kind of where it came from.
You're from Michigan.
Yes.
You grew up near Detroit. You're familiar with house music and raves. What was different about these guys? When you first went to these parties, what drew you? What made you think that as a visual storyteller, you needed to tell this story?
I think it was, and I talked with Shelby, Shelby. I talked with Shelby Athagia about this a while ago.
Real quick for the
Who
viewers,
is Shelby?
Can you let them know who Shelby Athagia is?
Shelby Athagia, which I also refer to her as Shelby Aguirre, is this gal in Tucson local, went to the U of A as well, and was, in kind of the music scene for a little bit because she got dragged into it. She didn't start with Dazed and Confused, this movement. She kind of got dragged into one of the nightlies at Playground and just got hooked as well. And then her journey was interesting. She learned to DJ. Then she became a DJ on KXCI local radio here, which is kind of a big deal. There's only 4 of them that do electronic music. And then, then she became like a yoga person. She started to create a music producer. She started creating her own music as Panther, they were called, with her and Romy and Kona. And she's this gal that's just like I could see that she was growing within this scene and doing a lot of cool stuff. And so we've kind of reflected on it years later because she's been a good friend. And I was telling her, I was like, I've never resonated with Detroit. Even though I was there, once in a while growing up, I was kind of like that typical, metro kid that would go there for a baseball game or a hockey game or like go to a nice restaurant. It's like I would always enter into Detroit like a lot of people do for metro to enjoy the city. But of course, like many people do, then you leave because you're scared of the city. And then it took me basically until 2014 to be like, oh no, Detroit's incredible. Like, I don't hate poor people anymore. And so like, when you're young, you just have these weird things that you're taught. And so once I realized that like, all right, this city is an incredible city with a lot of culture and it's struggling, I wanted to see what I could do with my stuff there. And so 2014, 2015, I was operating with low rent, in the city with a bunch of people in a house and just doing videos for free, working with nonprofits, working with, people that I knew needed help and just couldn't pay. And so I made some really interesting content there in terms of dance content, stuff with people that were revitalizing the city, the neighborhoods and stuff like that. And I still didn't identify with the city, even though, I did see the scene. I went to movement a bunch, which used to be called, what was that called? DEMF, Detroit Electronic Music Festival. They used to call it DEMF, and then it got big, and so they called it Movement. But after that, I went to underground shows at like little, wine bars, and like, of course I went to, like TV Lounge and stuff like that for the bigger stuff, but I never identified with it. And it took me coming back to Tucson and seeing how the scene operated here during this moment in time we're talking about for me to be like, oh, this is special. Like people say it's special in Detroit, but I felt it was more special here because it's harder to operate here. And that's kind of the point of the documentary is Tucson is such a crazy little town where things seem to pop up and die every other week. And just the fact that this scene could survive for a year was pretty fascinating. And then, of course, to jump forward, now it's all gone. Like most of the people in this documentary that I interviewed are gone from the city of Tucson, not just from the scene. And so I think that's what the underlying, the through line, I guess I should say, is that I could tell that the way things operate in this city are very special. And I've never seen it anywhere else like this.
So you've been an artist in Tucson yourself before this documentary, before following these different electronic dance movements. What was it like around that time? It's 2014 when you first got to Tucson? Is that right?
End of 2011, I came here to finish school at the U of A. So, and then I didn't leave until 2014. So I was in the university bubble, right? Which I love explaining that, like, when I was in Tucson the first time, I wasn't in Tucson because when you're in that university bubble, you have the blinders on, right? You're this ignorant kid, you're on campus, like, maybe you'll go to Fourth or Congress once in a while, like, because someone said it's cool, but, like, you're really hanging out, at the house parties there or, like, on University Ave or, like, I really didn't experience the city of Tucson while I was in university, even though I was operating as a journalist. I still was just very much in that bubble at the Daily Wildcat, which is the local student newspaper at the university. Every story that I was covering was on campus, right? And that's just how things operate there. So yeah, it truly took 2016 is when I came back to Tucson. It was me rediscovering the city finally.
That's the time period that I want to talk about a little bit. Can you paint a picture for the viewers what it was like in Tucson during 2016 as an artist that was involved in the community and supporting the scene? Can you just take us back and kind of describe what you saw in that scene as a whole?
Well, and I will say I should premise it with, I came back from Europe. Like I was saying, I was traveling Europe for 6 months in 2016. So I didn't show up to Tucson until September of 2016, at the very end of the year. And so what I immediately did was I need money because I had spent all my money abroad and I didn't work for like the month that I was in Michigan before coming over. And so I immediately needed money. And so as an artist does, I got a job at Pima Federal Credit Union as a bank teller. And I worked that job for 6 months. And so that allowed me to, of course, work under bank hours, which was important to me in terms of like you close at 5, and you'd be out by 6. And so basically it allowed me to do stuff in the afternoon and do stuff on the weekend because, banks are closed on Sunday and they're only open till 1 on Saturday. So that gave me the schedule I needed to be able to reach out to the city again and get involved. And this is how I met you. This is how I met Rich, is like Creative Tucson came out of that. Like I was able to operate in a way where I could get involved in things that interested me and put myself out there. And so, yeah, and by the end of 2016, early 2017, I was already involved with you at Creative Tucson, trying to make silly content, for free kind of stuff. And then, Brink came along and all this stuff. And so I dove in really quick. I always have this, is it dive? Is it dove? Dived? Dove. I thought it was dived.
You dove in.
Yeah, that's the whole point of dove.
Dove.
You don't have to say that.
Yeah. Anyway, I
just dove in.
Yeah, for
dove
any
right
listeners out there, if you could just figure out which one we're supposed to say. But I threw myself into all this stuff and just, the whole like throw it against the wall, see what sticks. And sure enough, Creative Tucson stuck. And like you and I basically started making content. And that was the catalyst for me to go and ask Elio and Ashley, can I interview about this as scene? Because I wanted to make a little ditty for Creative Tucson. So that's kind of but yeah, in terms of being an artist, I was very new to the Tucson scene in 2016. I didn't, as anyone would coming into Tucson, which I kind of like Tucson for this, you come in and you don't think it's cool. Like you hear it's cool, and then you're like, well, hold up. Like, where is everything? Where is everybody? Like, where is this cool operating? And it is operating at such a low frequency and like an underground vibe where you need to know someone to get in. Like, you can't just come from Portland because Tucson is cool and then just enter into the cool. Like, you won't know where it is. And so that took me a while as well. And I kind of like that about Tucson, is that you need to dedicate your time and energy to this place for it to accept you and bring you in. So in the beginning as an artist, it was nothing. It was literally me trying to make money and figure out what project was going to be next. Because the idea in Europe was to interview people, but I got mugged in Brussels and lost all of my gear. And so, like Europe was truly just me traveling instead of being a journalist like I wanted to be. And so I had that itch to get back into creating like content again.
Do you think you had to learn any big lessons while you were gone in Europe? Was getting mugged a lesson? What did you take away from your time there?
Oh, that was definitely the beginning of of course I was one of those kids that I was very much a square growing up. I didn't drink or do any kind of drugs until after I was 21. And so I was always a designated driver and always kind of like, I tell people this a lot. Like I was an athlete growing up. Like I was told when I was young that I would play baseball as a career. Like that's what people were telling me. And I was like, okay. And then of course life changes. Like everyone is told this narrative and then you figure out that you're not good enough. And so, like me in college was pivoting to be like, what are my other skills? And then the second I got to university in 2009, I started journalism. Because this gal came, she was the editor-in-chief at the time of the newspaper, and she came into our class, Journalism 101, and she gave this like grandiose speech. No one was paying attention except for me. And she was like, we like, if you want to get started now, this is the best time. Like day one, come and see us at the newspaper. And then I just like raised my hand, and she was like, what? And I was like, do you guys do video? And she was like, yeah, we can do video. And I was like, okay. And then literally from that day, I was making four videos a week for the newspaper for the foreseeable future until basically after I graduated U of A. There was a small stint where I worked at Disney World, which I'd rather not talk about.
Cameras?
I did the photography program they have. You get college credit, which is incredible. 13 credits to just, can I swear on this?
Yeah.
13 credits to just around at Disney, which is unreal. And so, all of that to say basically like, I was very close-minded when I was young. And then, of course, you do some drugs once in a while at a music festival, and then you're like, I'm woke. But then, like, it really took me going to Europe, and then it wasn't the mugging thing as much as it was, like, experiencing the culture of people that when they look at the U.S., they're like, well, hold up, I got some questions for you because you don't know the answers yet. And so a lot of people in Europe question your ideals, and they call you ignorant, right? And they want to explain why. And I was open to hearing that. But either way, the mugging thing is something that um, I, was the beginning of my like, I need to think about what someone else is experiencing, even though they're doing something to me. So these were two like 18, maybe 20-year-old kids from Turkey. They were immigrants into Brussels, and at the time, the sentiment was we're getting flooded with immigrants and we don't want to help them. And so at the time, all these people from Turkey and blah, blah, blah weren't getting support. They were poor, they were homeless. And of course, they see a guy interviewing someone in the park with a nice camera, they're going to steal it. Like that makes sense because they know they can sell that for money. And so it literally took just like that for me to be like, this isn't about me anymore. It's like it really helped me see what is going on around me and what are the actions that are being put on me, but what are the reactions that they deserve. And so it's like, no, I don't want to find those kids and put them in jail. Like it's a better way to be like, why'd they steal the camera? Because this country isn't taking care of them. Like take care of your immigrants. And so it's like, I like that I could take a situation like that and apply a more positive narrative to it. And like, I've been trying to do that kind of ever since.
Does that sort of stuff inform how you pick a project? Like, how does Ty Besh pick a project? Is it based off of an ideal? Do you have a point that you want to make? How do you see yourself like when you're picking projects? What's going on in your mind?
I think you know full well, and it's good to explain for sure, the amount of content that I've created that are like my projects in quotes, even just in Tucson, is exponential. Like the things I've created here are just like literally on my website. It's like, you know, whatever, 30 videos or something. And so I like to separate project from content. So like I've created a lot of content in Tucson and all over the world, I guess at this point. But a project for me is, something that I want to take time to think about and refine and put resources to, which, you know, you and I and Rich actually just shot the other day, which was the Magic Bench Project, which is a little comment on gentrification that's happening in Tucson and how, like, you know, what different views can you take of gentrification. And so that was a project, right? I spent time on it, I spent money on it to rent the gear that we wanted, all that kind of stuff. And so, I mean, I would say projects have been more of like, what do I want to say to someone? But I will also say, for whatever reason, because I have a kind of a creative mind that's like the machine up there is always turning. I mean, I've had a lot of projects in general where it's like the one that I thought of in Europe when I was in, you know, walking over this bridge in London, and I'm just like looking at the water, and for some reason this thought pops up in my head, and I thought, well, you've done a lot of work with dancers. I did a lot of photo and video work with dancers, like, you know, basically when I was here at U of A and afterward. And I was like, well, you've never interviewed them. Like, that's my thing, right, is interviewing people, and I've never once interviewed a dancer. And I had that thought in Europe, and I was like, I need to fucking interview dancers. Like, what am I doing? And so that's where the Story Plus Dance project that it took me years to do came from, where it's like, I want to give dancers a voice because they always use their voice through their movement. That's how they speak to people, is through their movement. But I want to get them in an uncomfortable situation where they need to use their voice, where they need to figure out, like, you know, how to be uncomfortable on camera and share some stories. And so, just to explain that project, like you know, very slimly, is I found a dancer to be interviewed. I gave them 3 to 5 minutes to tell a story from their life, whatever it was, good or bad, any kind of story they wanted. And then I took that story and I played it to another dancer friend of theirs, and that dancer improv danced to that story. So whatever the story was giving them in terms of the feeling it was evoking on them, or like the cadence of their voice, the dancer would improv dance to that, and then they would switch. So I'd get a story from the other one, bring it back. And so it was 2 videos, but with 4 things going on: a person telling a story, a person dancing for each video. And that took a couple years to get only whatever it was, of 6 different people. It was a lot of work, and that's the problem with projects, right? Is like, they can be great ideas, but maybe the timing is wrong. Maybe you don't have the resources. And so, like, a lot of my projects, the Story Plus Dance one definitely speaks to, I didn't have enough money. I was living my life elsewhere, and this was operating on the side as like a plant, like a bee project, or just when I have some time, I'll try to do it. And so, literally that idea came to me in 2016. I didn't finish it until 2019. So, and again, it was only 6 people, but they're from all over the U.S. So, in terms of like projects in general, just to answer the question, I mean, I have a lot of ideas, And I guess at this point, it really is trying to figure out which idea is worth pursuing, because I would literally pursue all of them for a while, and it was too much. So, yeah, that's why, like with the short film that you and I did, the Magic Bench thing, and the documentary. I mean, we'll probably go into this, but you've already heard. I started filming this documentary at end of 2016 into 2017. I just am releasing it now. It's 2021. And I stopped filming in the beginning of 2018. So from 2018 to 2021, what was I doing? Like typical shit, right? Like this was on the back burner and it had no resources to be finished. So it definitely speaks to, I guess, like what you were asking before. What is it like to be an artist in Tucson? If you are lucky enough to be an artist in Tucson and being paid well, it's a different story. I think most of us are operating on the level I'm operating on, where it's just like you got a day job or you need to take like stupid shit to make money. And so maybe your projects are a little more watered down, but at least you're getting them done. And that's kind of how I feel about it.
Can you tell me a little bit about the pressure to work for free? Because as far as I understand it, most of these are all zero budget, and like literally, I mean zero budget projects. Tell me a little bit about the pressure to work for free.
Yeah, that's really tough. I hate having this conversation because the fact that it's still a conversation that everyone can have is really sad. And of course now there's platforms, right, that are coming out to try to make it easier to be an artist and make money, which is good. I believe that in some ways that helps for sure. But yeah, it's hard to change the mindset of the general public, right? In any facet, in any way or form. So for whatever reason, people, when they think of video or photography or any creative media, for some reason or another, they've always thought that it should be for free because it's art. And what you do with art is for fun. Or what you did with art was arts and crafts in school for like an hour in your classes. And so for whatever reason, that translates into, now that you're an artist as an adult, you're just doing this for fun, right? Or like I can't pay you for this. Like it's kind of just silly stuff. And so how do you change people's mind in terms of, you need to pay me for this? That's always a conversation that I honestly don't even know how to answer. But yeah, in terms of my personal experience, yes, I still work for free most of the time, whether it be my own projects or not, where it's like, I guess I've enjoyed Tucson more because it's more of like a bartering system or a back and forth. We're like here, because we're a small community, I can shoot something for someone, or they can help me shoot something and they know that I'll get them on the next time. And so it's a give and take, which I enjoy more because it makes it seem more genuine and acceptable. And I agree with that. But yeah, I mean, for years, people expected me to spend, 40 to 100 hours on a video project and basically just deliver it to them for free. And I've never liked that. And honestly, that's why I haven't stayed in LA. I've done a few stints in LA where I want to work in the film industry because I think that's where my skills can be most beneficial to me in terms of compensation. And I don't like it because there is that inbuilt, you got to put in this many years of free work as a PA or a blah, blah, blah. And you got to hustle. And then, you'll be rewarded with, paid PA work, or then they'll let you on the camera team as a third assistant or whatever it is. And you're basically on this weird 5 to 10 year timeline that everyone seems to know that they're on, but they have to be okay with it or they don't, but either way they're on it. And the second I realized that, I was like, nah, I'm out. I was only in LA this last time for 3 months. And I got so mad about how, this culture still operates there, even though I'm very lucky to know many people in the industry that were able to give me paid work more often than not, which I know that is not most people's situation. And I was still mad about how the industry operates. And so that's literally why I called my friend from Michigan. This is an incredible story just about how things work. I was at Central Michigan University in 2009, and there's this dude named Kyle Minch. And he kind of poached me out of some of these media classes. He was a senior, I was a freshman. And he was like, hey, you seem like you want to do stuff. And I was like, yeah, sure. That's why I came to school. And so he was like, well, I have a, what do they call those? Where independent study. He's like, I have an independent study where my entire senior year is me being able to do whatever projects I want. I have no boundaries. And so he wanted to make some feature films. He wanted to make some short films. He wanted to do some music video stuff, whatever. And he just kind of poached me as like you're going to be my on-camera person. And I was like, no, I want to be a camera person. And he was like, no, you're going to be an on-camera person. And we had this argument every single time, but it always ended up me being the actor, which was annoying as fuck. But he liked me doing that. And so I think he just liked that I was willing. And in the way I treat collaborative projects, even films, is basically, even though you're an actor, you should be able to tell me what you want to do, and then we can talk about that. Like, I'm not going to tell you what you need to do. Like, this should be a collaboration. And he liked that about me, I think, is I always had these crazy ideas that we could do while I was acting. And so we do all this stuff, right? Freshman year of college. Fast forward to 2018, I'm having a terrible time in LA. I don't like what's happening there. I contact him and I go, hey, I heard you were out here. I want to say hi to you before I leave. And he goes, well, hold up. Don't leave yet, because don't give up on the industry, because I have something for you. He was an assistant director on Top Chef. And this is what brought me onto working with Top Chef. Was he was like, you can leave LA, but come with me and work on Top Chef so you can see what it's actually like to be in the industry and be taken care of, in quotes, right? And so that's what took me to Louisville, Kentucky. And I was there for a month and a half shooting with them and just working on the sets with them. And he kind of gave me this interesting amount of freedom in terms of like, I could work transportation services, which I literally got to drive the chefs around in a BMW, or I could just work as a PA if I wanted. He gave me this interesting amount of freedom that you would never get as a normal person on these film sets. And it still wasn't good enough. And so I traveled Asia after that instead of kind of taking advantage of that situation. It kind of pissed me off enough where I still was like, I'm not going to take advantage of this, which I should. I'd rather just go and fuck off in Asia. And that's what I did for 7 months.
More important to you, obviously, is the projects than the content. Is that right?
Yeah, because content, which I think has its merit, I think a project, however you want to define it, is you giving it more time and resources and importance, where then it can become something bigger. Like when you think of content now, right, of course, you think of like YouTubers and like just like blogs and stuff like that, which also have their place, and I agree with those, but it's almost me being more of a film person, right? I have the film mentality where it's like, no, this needs to be refined and like drafted a bunch of times.
Sorry to cut you off, but did you see Martin Scorsese's recent statement that he recently railed against the use of the phrase content, talking in regards to filmmaking, and went on to say like that it's honestly demeaning to us, because it's when a filmmaker says content, we're talking about the content of our film.
Right.
When you hear people throw around the word content, they mean like just something digital online to upload. And no, content actually means like you put a lot of work into it. Like it has like, there's good content to this.
Yeah, the stigma behind certain words is very hard to break.
I have to wonder, like, you're telling me about the struggles, basically, you know, and to cut it short, like the struggles of being an artist and getting paid to do it and dealing with the industry. Does that affect your relation now to the audience? Is there any animosity? What's it like? What's your relation to your audience? Like, what's your point of view towards the audience as a filmmaker?
No, that's a great question. And you kind of remind me of how hands-off I still am with things like Patreon or, you know, like whatever kind of subscription service, where it's like, I still feel uncomfortable asking people for money. Like, again, this is built into me as a Midwest farm boy kid, right? Is like, don't ask for anything. Like, you need to help other people. They're not going to help you. And so that's definitely carried over into my creative, you know, career, basically, where like, I don't think I deserve to be paid for my content, right? If I'm making it and it's not for a business or a company, then I shouldn't get paid. Like I do believe that, because it's like, it's instilled in my head from all these years of, you know, whatever it was growing up. And so of course that's not how it should be. But yeah, again, I don't have a Patreon. I don't have a way for people to pay me for my content or anything that I make, any kind of stuff like that. It's definitely one of those things where it's like, I'm still stumbling through that portion of all of this, where it's like, all right, I'm 30 years old. I just turned 30, like 2 weeks ago. And so now everyone tells you at 30 years old that you need to know what you're doing, or at least have an idea of what you're doing, because like now the clock is ticking. And so, yeah, I've definitely kind of, you know, taken a second to be like, do I want to be an artist? Like, how is this going to work for me? Because it can't work the way it is now, forever, especially. And so, it's a really tough thing to approach. In terms of how I see an audience, that's the other part of it. The word audience that I love is like, whatever I'm making, I know the audience is anybody. In terms of like the Story Plus Dance project, I know that, one, interviewing someone is therapeutic in general. And two, listening to someone tell you a story is also therapeutic, and it can also, kind of bring up different thoughts, your own thoughts, or maybe trigger something from your past. So that's how I approach any kind of content that I put out that is interview-based, where it's like, I know that the story that this person is telling in this video will touch someone. Whoever it is, I don't know that answer. I don't think I ever will. In terms of target audience, I don't know what a target audience is for my stuff. I think anyone can watch my content and be inspired or be emotional or be touched by it. And that's why, like, most of my content is interview-based, is like another human being telling me a story, and now I'm sharing that story with someone else. With the Magic Bench stuff, or like my short film things, that's more of like, my audience would be that specific thing. So it's like people that are worried about gentrification, or people that are worried about indigenous people, like stolen land, all that kind of stuff. I know that's my target audience. But again, that's more recent. That's literally just a month ago that we did that. So most of my work that I've done in the past 10 years has quite literally been, I want to tell someone's story. Whoever hears it, I don't care, because I know it's going to touch someone, at least someone. Whether that's a good or bad thing, that's how I've treated it for sure.
I think that's a great segue to the new doc. To give the title again, Tucson Electro Doc.
Yeah.
A moment in Tucson Underground. How did you pick this subject?
So, when I got to Tucson from traveling Europe, I wanted to find the house and techno scene that I knew and loved in Europe. When I found it, it was called Dazed and Confused. And it was being operated by this dude from Italy. And I was like, what the fuck is this Italian dude doing in Tucson? Turns out he works for the university, or worked for the university. And he wanted to bring this music to Tucson because it was nowhere to be found. And I was like, this is interesting. There's something to this. Once I realized, by going to their first show, which was at an underground hookah lounge, that was their show. It was a secret show at a hookah lounge on kind of the more east side of downtown. I saw the people that were operating it. I saw the people that were showing up to the shows. And then it only took one more show after that to be like, oh, whatever's happening right now is a very special moment in time. And I can already see that just by going to this one show. That led me to want to interview all the DJs, interview the venue owners, interview people that, either became DJs or were in a part of the scene and were helping it grow, because I knew something was happening and I wanted to see where it would go. And so I followed it basically from the end of 2016 until the beginning of 2018. That's when I went to LA. So it was a full, a year and 3-4 months, almost a year and a half of just following this blossoming scene in Tucson that was just like a snowball. It just kept growing and growing while it was rolling down this hill.
What was so different about it?
I assumed it was different because, well, one, I had never heard of anything like it in Tucson before. In terms of the house and techno scene, I only knew Tucson to be a club scene, the very few small clubs on Congress or on 4th or whatever it was. So for me, it was like, here's some kids trying to throw some underground shows and be, genuine and cool and, whatever it was, timely, and take this energy that they have and just wrap it all up in these venues and these shows and just do something with it. And I don't think anyone had a plan, to be honest. That's what I loved about it, was there was the idea of, they knew that this was the time to do it, and so they were going to do it, and they just took advantage of it.
During your time interviewing everybody, what did you learn? Were there any big surprises, information like you didn't think you would find out, that you could have never imagined that you learned talking to these people?
Yeah, I mean, I interviewed about 24 people, and so they included, DJs, music producers, people that were throwing these events, venue owners. I think the overarching thing that I heard was not just the excitement, of course, in that moment in time that they had, but the hopeful, the hopeful thoughts that they had of what the future could be like. And so everyone, which is so sad because, obviously now it's a different story at the end of all this, but in that moment, everyone was like, this is going to change Tucson. Like, we know where this is going. Like, we're going to build a whole scene here, and it's going to change the energy of downtown, and we're going to finally, you know what I'm saying? Like, everyone had that hope, and it was so beautiful, but obviously so, I don't want to say ignorant, but it was like, you need that ignorance almost, right? To operate this kind of stuff where you're like, this will never die. This is forever. We love this. And so because they had that, I think that's why it was so beautiful. So I got a lot of that out of the interviews. And then especially, which is why I released it now, it's more timely to release it during a pandemic, was a lot of people saying it's impossible to survive here in Tucson. It's impossible to get paid here and have things, like no one supports things for more than a few months here. Everyone was saying this. And then you pair that with what's happening downtown in terms of the new wave of gentrification and, beautification, whatever you want to call it, infill, that's happening in Tucson, that's literally forcing people out of downtown, out of central Tucson, even out of Tucson in general. And so you put all those things together, and it was the perfect storm for this thing to be a pop-up, basically. And then now it's most of it's dead.
Do you offer any hope at the end of the movie? Do you have hope for, you're talking about gentrification and the end of a scene, and you kind of chronicle the end of dance music in town here. What's your hope for the future? What do you see?
I think it's funny that I chose to wear this shirt for a reason. And it's this.
Wait, let's get a...
Yeah, I'll get the chain out of the way.
Let's get that in there.
Yeah, get the camcorder zoomed in.
Is Tucson the new Austin?
So there's this realtor
yeah.
in Tucson that posted this on Instagram. It's her public post. And this is what's happening in Tucson.
That's a non-ironic tweet.
No, this is her being
That's a sales pitch.
This is a sales pitch for her to sell housing. And there are many people like her in Tucson right now where they can see it's their time to make money. And so, sure enough, I mean, whatever's happening to Tucson, I think the downside of it is, just like Austin, which is why I wore the shirt, I think a lot of people are going to be forced out of Tucson, especially low-income artists or low-income culture makers, right? You think of people in South Tucson that
What is your hope?
Yeah, okay,
what is
you're
your
right.
Hope?
My hope is to fast forward through all of that, right? I guess my hope is that the dream is that affordable housing could be a thing in Tucson, even though it's not a thing anywhere. It would be a beautiful thing if they could figure out affordable housing in Tucson to encourage people to stay here and continue to operate these kinds of scenes. Because at the end of the documentary, like you're asking, Shelby's last line talks about how there's already been a wave like this back in the 80s and 90s. And then it was dead for a long time. And then Dazed and Confused came along and helped encourage all these people to start the new scene. So it's just the waves that go through Tucson. And so, of course, we all hope that whatever happens on the other side of this gentrification round, where whether we can afford to live here or not, it would be beautiful to see more underground or, I guess, club scenes operating in Tucson. But we'll just have to see, because who knows? I don't have the money to stay here and do that. I know a lot of other people don't. So will there be an underground music scene in Tucson after this? Who knows? I'm not hopeful for it, but I think there will be some kind of music scene, because there's 4 or 5 of them left over that want to make something happen and have the resources to make something happen.
At this point, is this more of a movie about electronic music, or is this a movie about gentrification? What do you think?
It was a movie about electronic music. Then it was a movie about the people in Tucson. And now it is a movie about gentrification and what happens with gentrification. So this is why it's been however many years and I'm just releasing it now, is all of these things have come together to make this narrative where it's like, these are the people behind it. This is the music that everyone loved, but paired with the city planning that happens and knocking down buildings and pricing everyone out. This is what you do to these scenes, is you destroy them and you force everyone to leave for one reason or another. So it's funny how that kind of worked itself out like that.
So what's next for the Tucson Electro Doc?
Well, like I told you in the beginning, distribution is really tough when you're on your own, which I am. Because it was a no-budget project, it's a no-budget distribution. That's just the way it's going to go. But I have high hopes for that. In the meantime, I did have a first screening of the cut that I have initially made, which is a 50-minute 5-0 cut of exactly what I wanted to say. That's why it's not an hour and a half. It's why it's not a half hour. It's 50 minutes because it's exactly what I wanted to tell people with these interviews and with the story. Whether or not it stays like that or not, we'll see. But that's the best version of it that I see it as. It was shown to about 38 people at a local bar here that has a nice projector and sound system. Mostly the people that were in the film or involved in that scene. And so it was cool to show it to them. You know, it was safe. It was all masked up and stuff, and it was a good way to keep the space safe. And I could hear a lot of good criticism and things that I could look forward to a new edit with it from all the things that people said. Like, I mean, you have Rich over here running our cameras, and he didn't know about this music scene. And you know, the person that he brought with him didn't know anything about what was going on with this stuff. And there's a lot of people like that in Tucson. So I got to hear from these people that saw the film at the screening, whether they were in it or not, what they thought about it. And so now I'm churning those in my head, and I'm like, okay, the next draft of this film, which is going to fix, you know, some spelling mistakes in the subtitles and some things that were out of order that I forgot to put back, you know, because you're sitting with this thing, and I sat with it for years, right? You're in this tunnel vision with your edit, and you kind of lose the vision, the grander vision, the broader vision of what you're doing. And so there was a lot of that, like, oh, fuck, like I forgot to move that around or whatever it is. And so now that, you know, 40, 60 people have seen it already and have told me their thoughts on it, I'm going to definitely make a new cut of it, fix some things, maybe add some things to the story, maybe take away some things from the story. And then distribution, you know, as a DIY distributor, which I am basically, is very tough. And so, you know, you and I actually, I'm glad that you've been, you know, through with the process with me, is we've been trying to figure out a way to self-distribute, where it's like, how do you get money to pay for your, you know, how do you get people to pay for your videos, you know, with some kind of paywall or whatever it is. But everything's in the industry seems to be based around the Patreon style, where it's like, you need to be a subscriber. You're releasing, you know, a video a week or a video a month, which this is going to be one video. So none of those platforms are working for me in terms of like wanting to get more money than selling to a distributor, or like, you know, going through a thing like Film Hub, which I've been talking to the people over there, and I can submit to Film Hub and they'll put it on Amazon Prime, but I'll get 1 cent per hour that they watch, and it's 50 minutes. So I literally won't even get a cent anytime someone watches it. And so it's interesting to think about how distribution is working nowadays. There's so many platforms, but there's so little money to be made. It's still really in the people that are going to buy your film, like a Netflix, like a whatever, you know, a studio, like a small indie company, right? You really need to sell your own film still, or, which I'm going to hopefully do one day soon after the vaccines go out, is go on the road and do road shows. And so I can take this doc, go around the U.S. and be like, hey, next week I'm in Atlanta. If you want to see this film, like run a $50 Instagram ad, right? If you want to see this film, it's here for a weekend, so come on down. What's also nice is there's someone from the film that has now moved to Berlin. He's going to get it shown over there. He has some connects over there because he's in the music scene there. I know people in Detroit still that will get this shown at local theaters. I know people in Finland that will get this shown. Like, so I'm definitely, this is the first time that all the people I've met from all over the world, I'm finally calling on them and saying, hey, I have this thing, like, can you help me or not? Because I've never asked any of these people for anything. They've always just been people that I've met. So it's cool to have that network to reach out to. And of course, a year from now, we'll see what actually ever happens. But I will say it's been sadly tough. It's kind of discouraging in the Tucson realm in terms of, like, I've been trying to find an outdoor venue to show this at. I asked the Loft if I could show it there. They have an outdoor screening, you know, place as well in their parking lot. I've asked every place in Tucson if I could show it there, and it's been crickets. Not one person has gotten back to me. And it's really sad because they know it's a local film. They know I'm like all this stuff, and it's just, Tucson is in a weird place right now. I think while it's transitioning, that, like, you know, the Loft is only showing indie films, like that's their programming, and the drive-in over at the Annex, like they've got, you know, like the circus operating there, and like weird, you know, movie nights for Valentine's Day or whatever it is. They're not showing like a lot of local stuff, and I think that will change. But maybe in this moment in time, it's just not right to show it in the city it was made in, and so it's kind of weird to think that this will grow outside of Tucson before I think people in Tucson pay attention to it, which is kind of sad how that actually probably happens a lot. So yeah, distribution is going to be interesting. We'll see for sure.
For the aspiring filmmakers that might be watching, what was some of the biggest obstacles to get to this point?
Well, obviously the biggest one is time. I didn't have any time to sit with this footage and truly make something of it. And that's why it took basically a pandemic for me to sit down with all this footage and go, all right, it's time to make a film out of this. And so since 2018, it's just been sitting on a hard drive. And every once in a while, I'd have some time and maybe cut an interview a little bit, or maybe just like, like write down some notes that I might want to try to do. But it took years for me to be able to sit with this video and make something cohesive out of it. And I mean, that just speaks to, this is why films have editors. This is why films have a big budget and producers and all these people. It's like, it is a process and it's a team effort. And when you're doing it on your own and for free, you're not going to get to it. You're not going to get to it the way you want to get to it. And so I guess I feel lucky that I put it off for this many years, and I was okay with not releasing anything until now, because it's at least something I'm proud of. And it's at least something that I want people to hear, rather than me rushing to get it done, or giving it to some, $20 an hour editor to just see what they would do with it. Like, it's still my project and it's still my voice. And I think that's the most important thing about it for sure is I took the time and I struggled to get it done, but now it's something that one of the few things that I'm truly proud of that I've made, for sure.
Why now? Why did you release it now, all these years later, and then with the COVID restrictions, with no venues? Why was it important for you to release this now?
Well, we're in the middle of, as you know, in Tucson, an interesting round of development. And so the second I saw that happening, and it took me basically, because what I did was during the pandemic, I went and visited my parents for a second. I like quarantined in their basement for a couple weeks, got to see them, and then came back because I knew, like Fauci said, that once winter comes for people, especially out there, the virus would be really bad. So I was in Michigan for a couple months, and by the time I came back, downtown Tucson had like 17 new properties being built on, like brand new development. And I was like, what is happening? And so I guess I wasn't paying attention to that during the pandemic because I was inside so much. And so I never went downtown, March 2020 until, whatever.
So this wasn't a date that you've been stubborn on. You've actually felt inspired to release during the construction.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I mean,
like,
it's the worst time to release a film. It's the best time to release this film.
Okay.
That's how I explain it, for sure.
Nice. That's the quote.
Yeah.
That's the byline.
Yeah.
Awesome. What's it like in the editing bay, man? It's just you in there. You don't have anybody edit your projects with you. Was anybody, like, were people involved in the movie allowed near the edit? Because I know, this movie, I have some involvement as like a background character. Never got the invite to see an edit. I assume maybe nobody else did. What was that like with the edit?
I will say,
what were the rules? Were there rules? Do you have idiosyncrasies that you follow? You know what I mean?
Well, how much do you want me to get into the logistics of how I edit?
Let's kind of I want to dial back because I'm genuinely curious, and we're not about to end this without answering those curiosities. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of it.
The easy answer to how I edit videos comes from being a journalist for, whatever it was. And so when it comes to me approaching interviews, I can cut those very well. I have a good memory, and I have a good system in terms of keeping things aligned in the timeline, where I have a different timeline for every subject matter or whatever it is. And so that was the beautiful thing of having so many years to look through these interviews. And of course, we haven't mentioned that I got footage at every single party that they threw. And we're talking Blackmagic Cinema Camera raw footage that I then converted into, whatever it was, an MP4. And so I'm working with 3 terabytes of footage for this documentary. It's just a massive amount of stuff to have to deal with. But I will say, because of my journalism storytelling background, the interviews were the easiest part. And so in the very beginning, I could already tell the story that I wanted to tell. In terms of being able to line up and go back and forth between these people and have a cohesive story. It wasn't until this past year during the pandemic that I had to step out of my comfort zone, which is now how do I pair all of this party footage with the interviews, and how do I put things in between it to make it interesting? Which is why it made sense with the pandemic stuff and the gentrification stuff, where now there's something to put in between the interviews, in between the shows, where it's not just like energy, like music, like whatever. It's like, all those things paired with construction, things being knocked down, new things being built. Like, so now there's stories built into each other that make it more interesting to watch and make it more available to people outside of Tucson. Because that's the other thing, right? Is like, you're editing your projects, like you're saying, what's your audience? I don't want just Tucson people to identify with this story. This is a worldwide story in terms of how a music scene operates, how it dies because of the city you're in or the resources you don't have, and then how cities get changed and how that. So all those stories are relevant to the world in general. So yeah, and just in terms of the logistics of editing, I mean, yeah, I sat with it myself for many hours over the course of many years. Never showed it to anybody. Never asked anyone if I was on the right track. And yeah, like I said, it's 50 minutes because it's exactly what I want to say. There's no outside influence on it except for my thoughts that I've had since 2017.
It's your first documentary. Does that change how you handled the edit?
Yes, because I didn't think it would be a documentary. I had all this footage and I didn't know what to do with it. And so that's also kind of paired with all these years of not knowing what to do with it. It's the first documentary I produced. It's not the first documentary I've been a part of. And so I've witnessed people shooting documentaries, making documentaries. So I have a good sense of what should go into that process. But yeah, then like what you're saying, when it was my turn to make my own, especially on my own, there was a lot of authenticity that went into it where it's like, all right, I have to throw a lot of this out of the window because I don't have the resources that all these people that I've observed had. But yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's been a weird process, definitely.
You're editing people's voices, people's opinions. Are you worried about responses? Were you worried about, I mean, now it's out, but were you worried about how people would take it?
I'm editing people's voices and their opinions from 4 years ago and releasing it now. Imagine the amount of growth that these people have had in their life.
Did you fear negative backlash from the subjects?
I already knew there would be, from some, at least, in terms of what they've been through in their life, how they see each other now, whether they like each other or not now. There is that as well, where it's like, whether there's animosity or more love now, it's like you don't know which one it is for every person. But yes, just to simplify it, interviewing people 4 years ago and releasing footage 4 years later is a very interesting way of doing a documentary because not only did the people change, but the city changed, and that's kind of the whole point of this, is everything changed since I shot this.
I feel that. I cried, honestly.
Yeah.
During the film.
Yeah.
To that point, there was like that one shot of my studio, and I was like, yeah, it was like a memory. I was like, fuck.
Yeah, definitely.
I remember that era, like it totally hit. So I want to see it. Where can people see it?
So what we're doing, what basically you and I figured out, you kind of helped me along with this process, which was very nice of you to kind of do research, is I've kind of landed on Vimeo Pro. That's just the way it's going to go. I want to be able to charge people $12 to watch this, right? This is me being like we were saying, as an artist, I deserve money.
Is this a sale or a rental?
This is going to be a sale to own.
Sell it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It'll be like you can own this copy for whatever it is money. Then from there, there's the sadly online-only film festivals, which I'm going to submit to as many niche music ones that there are, right? So whatever festivals that kind of focus on more indie and underground music stuff, I'm going to submit to them and just pay the fee, whatever that fee is. Then from there, it goes to theatrical release, which will not be for a year from now for sure, where I'm going to try to get it in the Loft, try to get it in other, like the screening room here, downtown Tucson, try to get it shown in Detroit, in Berlin, in different theaters and different like venues like that. But in the near future, yeah, it's just going to be me trying to get people to pay me for 4 years of work that I've done. Yeah, it's all it is.
Totally. And we will keep the description in this video dynamic. As soon as there's a link,
yeah,
we'll add it below.
For sure.
If anyone's watching. No link yet, but there's going to be a link.
Oh, yeah, I'm buying that Vimeo Pro membership this week.
Yeah, there should be a Vimeo Pro. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for that. And then how can people follow you? How can people check out your work now, these other projects? you got something to plug?
I will say I don't treat my Instagram very well, so I would direct people to my website first, which I'm sure you'll link, but it's the Trusty Digital
Let's get
Media.
that. Let's spell it out. Yeah, what is
Yeah.
it? Trusty Digital. What's that?
TRUSTY digitalmedia.com.
Trusty Digital
Trusty.
Media.
And I came up with that name when I was traveling. Yeah, it's just it came out of you can trust Ty, you can trust me to do good work. That's why it's Trusty Digital Media.
.com.
Yep,
Trusty
exactly.
Digital Media.
No, it's not. It's not. YouCanTrustMe.com. Yeah,
Trust me. Digital.
But yeah, I guess Instagram is yaboy Besh, YABOIBESH. But again, I don't
IGTV. He's got a lot of content. There's some hours of watching on IGTV.
I was gonna say my website and my
And
IGTVs have a lot of content.
Hours
Yeah.
of content.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So check those out, and then shout outs, documentary shout outs. Who do you want to shout out?
I would love to shout
For
out.
YouTube.
I mean, you can go to Tucson Electro on Instagram. It's
Yeah.
like Tucson Electro. That's the name of it.
Mhm.
You can on the poster of the movie. I specifically put every single person's name that I interviewed on the poster to pay homage to them because they definitely meant a lot to me and were here for the ride. So you can see everyone that's in the doc just on the poster. I would definitely say follow that Instagram.
Very democratic answer.
Yeah,
I like it.
Thank you. Yeah. Aside from that, yeah, I mean.
Yeah.
I was gonna say Tucson Electro Doc is Tucson. It is all of us.
It is Tucson.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for talking to me
Yeah.
about this documentary. Thank you for making a documentary. Thank you for highlighting what happened that year and a half. Yeah, man. Thanks so much, and I hope that people watch this to the end and didn't click away. So thank you. If you're watching, leave a comment.